Hello everybody, welcome back. Here we're going to see the second part of business environment, that is chapter 1 business environment. We've been discussing a few things about business environment, but did we really discuss what business environment is? So you have to learn what business environment is, what its definition is and all those. Maybe it will come for a 2-mark question or a MCQ or sort. So what exactly is a business environment? So business environment is the sum of several factors, that is, it could be external or it could be internal factors that affect the functioning of business. Okay, so what is business environment? Business environment is those factors which could be external or internal to the firm or the organization that will affect the functioning of the business. I've given you examples already, like it could be customers, or it could be government, it could be policies, it could be regulations, laws and regulations, etc. So these are all factors which affect the business. Okay, and there is another business management guru called William Glueck, who has given a definition for business environment. So what does he say? He says environment includes factors outside the firm which can lead to opportunities for or threats for the firm. It means environment includes factors which are outside the firm. Okay, he says environment includes factors which are outside the firm which can lead to opportunities and threats. So we've seen this, right? It's just put into a nice definition. So the second point, according to William Glueck, is there are many such factors, but the most important ones are socio-economic factors, technological factors, suppliers, competitors and government. Okay, so what are the what according to Glueck, William Glueck, is business environment? Business environment is or includes those factors which are external to the environment. That is, he said it is external to the environment and it will affect the functioning of the business. That is, it can lead to opportunities and threats. Okay, and second point is that the most important, there are many factors, but the most important factors are socio-economic, technological, suppliers, competitors and government. So you have to remember this definition. There's nothing big in it. Just read through and understand. There's a question in practice manual, and this is also very important. It says relationship between organization and its environment. Remember, I told you there's a similar question where we discussed the influence of environmental factors on business. So that is a different question. But as soon as you hear the word relationship, you should write this answer. Okay. So what is the relationship between organization and environment? Relationship between organization and environment, like we discussed in the earlier part, organization will take resources from the environment in the form of manpower, finance, etc., and will convert it into output, such as products or services. It could be product or it could be service. It will convert it into outputs using processes, manufacturing processes, production processes, or any conversion process. And then it will give these products or outputs back to the customers for a profit. So that is one way in which that is one way where the relationship comes into play. So like we learned in the previous class or in the previous session, business works as a subsystem of the environment, right? So it takes inputs in the form of manpower, in the form of finance, and in the form of raw materials and all those things. It gets converted into final output, which is the products or the output or the services, and then it is transferred or exchanged to the customers for a profit. So this is how the system works. Okay, but the relationship can be explained in terms of 3 points, that is exchange of information, exchange of resources and exchange of influence and power. Okay, so what is exchange of information? We all know every business organization is giving out information and data in some way or the other, right? When you sell a product, what happens? It gives data about your sales. When new competitor comes in, it gives information about the industry, that so many members are there or so many competitors are there in the market. So every time the business does something, it gives out data voluntarily or involuntarily. Okay, so successful business, what they do is they keep on collecting data, they keep on analyzing it, and they try to form strategies to make their business successful. Okay, that's what the first point is saying. It says every organization generates and transmits information. It scans the environment for information. Such information can be used for competitive analysis and for research purposes. Of course, it is used for learning more about your competition and for conducting research. The second point is exchange of resources. What do you mean by exchange of resources? Resources could be in terms of raw materials, in terms of money, that is finance, in terms of people, that is manpower, or anything from which can be taken from the environment. And like I said before, it gets converted into the final output by putting them through different processes, and the final output is sold to the customers. Okay. The third point is exchange of influence and power. What do you mean by that? So it says the environment holds considerable power over the organization by virtue of its being more inclusive. So we know the environment is bigger in nature, right? The firm is just a small part of the environment. So environment is bigger. So by being bigger, by virtue of being bigger or by virtue of being inclusive, the environment holds bigger power, considerable power over the firm. Okay, it is not vice versa. It is not that firm holds considerable power over environment. This could come for an MCQ, true or false. It will say the firm holds considerable power over the environment, true or false. Explain. It is not so. The firm does not hold power. The environment holds considerable power over the firm by virtue of its being inclusive and by virtue of its command over information and inputs. So we know who's got more control. Is it the firm or the environment? The environment has power over the resources, right? Because the resources belong to the environment, and the resource and the information also is present in the environment, right? The firms produce information and it is present in the environment. So by virtue of its command over resources and the information, it holds more power over the firm. So is it clear? So here you can expect a true or false question, and also this could come as a 4 marks question. Okay, so explain the relationship between environment and the organization. So this is an important question. Learn it thoroughly. Next, we come across categories of business environment. Here it is said that the business is categorized into two. We have micro environment and the macro environment. So let's see the definition of micro environment. So what do you mean by micro environment? Micro environment is related to a small area or the immediate periphery of an organization. That is right on the boundary. There is a small area. Okay, that's how you got to see this. It's a small area in the immediate periphery of the organization. Micro environment influences an organization regularly and directly. What do you mean by regularly and directly? Whatever changes happen in this micro environment, it will affect the firm, say, on a regular basis, and it affects the firm directly and not indirectly. Suppose, for example, I'll just come to this later. It is also known as the task environment. Okay, so the micro environment generally consists of the supply chain. Okay, that is the suppliers, the intermediaries, the organization, the competitors, the customers, the markets. Okay, so that is in fact the supply chain. So the suppliers, the intermediaries, the organization, competitors, customers, and the market. Okay, so I'm coming back to the second point. It says micro environment influences the organization directly and regularly. So if you look at any of the micro environment factors like suppliers, intermediaries, organization, competitors, or the customers, if there is any problem or any issue among these factors, it will affect the organization directly, right? And it will also affect the organization regularly. So that is what the second point is trying to say. So anything that happens in the micro environment will affect the organization directly and regularly. Now coming to macro environment, it's just the opposite of this. What do you mean by macro environment? Macro environment means it constitutes the general environment which affects the working of all the firms. So it is the general environment which is affecting the working of all the firms. It is not pertaining to a small area, or it is not pertaining to a small organization. It is a general environment. It is bigger in nature, and hence the name macro. Okay, macro environment has broader dimensions and is largely external to the enterprise. Just now I explained it. So it is bigger in nature and it is not belonging to a small area or a small organization or an organization. It is bigger in nature and it is external to the enterprise. It mainly consists of what? Demographic, global, social, legal, economic and political factors. Okay, how will you remember that? Again, you can use a mnemonic. I use the mnemonic dogs left over culture. Okay, so how will you remember it? You have to remember dogs left over culture. So there's a dog's picture in the slide. You should remember it using this mnemonic, or you can use any other mnemonic like I said before. So when you said dog, you have to remember two things: D for demography, G for global. Okay, then slept, S is socioeconomic. Okay, then you have L is legal, E is economic, P is political, T is technological, and then you have on culture. So you have cultural environment as well. So you have to remember categories of business environment: micro environment, macro environment. This is also a question in your practice manual, which is individually asked for what is micro environment, explain macro environment and its composition or its factors. So in which you have to explain each of these factors. The next topic is elements of micro environment. So be careful, don't confuse this. Categories of environment, elements of environment. Remember the terms, okay? So when they ask for categories, you have to write macro, micro. When they ask elements, you have to write this. Elements of micro environment. Elements of micro environment are, like I told you before, the supply chain itself, the suppliers, the intermediaries, the organization, the competitors, the customers and the market. Okay, so you have to write one or two sentences explaining these terms. So what do you mean by suppliers? Suppliers are nothing but people or organizations or firms which produce or which provide the organization with raw materials and other resources. Just the one liner. Okay, then who are intermediaries? Intermediaries are people who stand between suppliers and the organization, or the organization and the customers. So the slide says intermediaries are middlemen who assist in the flow of goods and services. So intermediaries are those middlemen who assist in the flow of goods and services from the producers to the end users. They include agents, wholesalers and retailers. So it is nothing but people who sell, who stand in between, they are middlemen, right? So another easy term is brokers. So you should not write it here. You should not write it here as brokers, but then you should write the definition here. They are middlemen who help in the flow of goods and services from the producers, people who produces it, to the end users. For example, if you take an organization like Reliance or say ITC, there are farmers who produce goods, farmers who produce say rice or wheat or whatever. So they sell it to the intermediaries, or they sell it to the organization through the intermediaries. Okay, and the Reliance, what they do, they sell it to the customers through another shop, a retail shop. So this could be a retail shop or the middlemen who stand in between. Then you have the organization itself. Here you have to write what is the organization. Organization consists of the owners of the organization, the board of directors, the employees who make up the organization. So who are the owners? Owners are the people who invest, right? And board of directors are people who are responsible for the smooth working of the organization and its services, right? And then employees are the people who are actually responsible for doing the actual work. So just one liner you have to write. This probably can come for a 4 marks, so you have to write one line each. Okay, the next topic, the next element is competitors. Competitors are those people or those firms in the environment who fight or who compete for the same resources as the organization. So your organization is there, you are competing for certain raw materials, your competitors also will compete for the same raw materials. Your competitors also will compete for against you for your customers. They're trying to sell similar products to your customer. So what is a competitor? Competitors are those business entities that compete for the resources and customers. Okay. Now customers are people who buy your product, right? Customers are people who pay the money and acquire your products and services, who buy your product and services. Customer need not be the consumer. Your father can buy certain dress for you, okay, a dress, but that dress is actually used by the daughter or the son. So the son is the consumer, the father was the customer. So there's essentially a difference between consumer and customer. Consumer is the end user of the product. The user who actually uses or consumes the product is the consumer, and the people who buy is called, who pay the money and buy the product is called the customer. Okay. The next point is market. Market is a composition of systems, institutions, infrastructures where parties engage in exchange of products. Very clear, right? What does it say? Market is a system consisting of several parties, infrastructures and institutions where people exchange their products for money, right? And buyers buy these goods for money. That is, there is an exchange is taking place between the buyers and the sellers in terms of money and goods, right? Hence, the market is larger than the customers. It is very obvious that the market is larger than the customers. In fact, the customers is just a part of the market. You also have several other institutions. You have middlemen, for example. You have suppliers. You have regulatory authorities. All these people come together to make the market. So the market is essentially bigger than the customers, and it is a place where people sell and buy, or that is exchange their goods and services for money. Yeah. So that was the question, or that was the point. That was the question which says explain the elements of micro environment. Elements of macro environment. What are elements of macro environment? Again, elements of macro environment I already gave you the mnemonic. It is dog, slept, our culture. It is D for, in dog you have D for demographic, G for global. Slept, in slept you have S is socio-cultural, L is legal, P is political, T is technical, and C is cultural, or on culture, cultural. So all these 6 or 7 points you have to remember. Okay, so dog, slept, over, culture. That's what you have to remember. I'll be explaining one by one. Each of these elements will have a scope of coming for 2 marks or 4 marks question. They'll ask you to explain demographic environment, or they'll give you explain demographic environment and global environment, 4 marks. So based on that you have to write, and you have to study each and every point, each and every environment separately and in detail. Okay, let's get to demographic environment. What is environmental scanning? What do you mean by scanning actually? Scanning is you are looking for something, right? You're browsing, you're scanning for something. Okay, so you just have to write what is scanning in your own words, or you can write it from the definition. So scanning means, environmental scanning is the process of scanning for relevant opportunities and threats that affect the business for purpose of decision making. So it says, what is scanning? Environmental scanning is scanning the environment for opportunities and threats. If you write so much itself, you will get marks. So you have to say environmental scanning is the process of scanning the environment for opportunities and threats for the purpose of decision making. Why do you scan the environment? Why do you collect opportunities and threats? It's for decision making, right? It's for forming a strategy. So that is what it is written. It is the process of scanning the environment for opportunities and threats for the purpose of decision making. If you write that, you will get full marks. Another 2 points you can add is, it is a process of gathering information. It is a different way of putting it. It is a process. It is a process of gathering information. It is a different way of putting the above point. It just says it is a process of gathering information from the environment and forecasting the impact of changes. It is a process of collecting information from the environment and using it for predicting the impact of certain changes on the firm. Okay. So 4 factors have to be considered for environmental scanning. So those 2 points are the definition. And the 4 factors which you have to consider for environmental scanning is, this is also a question practice manual. What are the 4 elements for environmental scanning? So that 4 elements are events, trends, issues and expectations, right? So the 4 elements are events, trends, issues and expectations. Okay, so you have to explain what those are. So events are nothing but they are specific occurrences in the environment. So certain things happen, those are events, specific occurrences in the environment. So these may be external or internal to the organization. So it could be something like a new government has come into, has been elected. So that is an event, okay. Or your CEO has changed, or CEO has been dismissed, or say has, or the CEO has been changed. So that is an event within the organization, okay. So such events can be observed or tracked. It is very evident, can be tracked or observed. So these are the 3 points you have to write for events, okay. So the next point is trends. So trends means many events come together or many events form a trend. So you know, right, how we do trend analysis, you do pattern analysis and all this. So what is the trend? Many events come together and they form a trend. So the groupings, the slide says the groupings of similar or relevant events that tends to move in a certain direction or in a particular direction. So what do you mean by trends? Many events leads to trends. So trends are essentially groupings of similar events. So these similar events which travel or move in a particular direction. So that is the definition of trends. And what are issues? Issues are the current concerns that arise in response to the events and trends. Okay. So what are issues? Issues are actually problems, right? So what are the problems that arise in response to the events and trends? Those are issues, okay. And expectations are demands made by interest groups in the light for their concern for issues. So what does that mean? Expectations are demands made by interest groups. So who are the interest groups? Interest groups could be stakeholders like your customers, like your employees. So what are the demands made by these people? So suppose for in response to a change, so suppose your general manager has changed, so the people expect certain things, and those, based on those expectations, they have demands. So these demands are called expectations. So this is an important question, like I said before. This is also an important question, so learn this also.